Uncle Dan.
Hey, Uncle Doug.
Here we are, three childless men.
Well, two of us are.
Two of us in company of each other.
And then one of us is back forever, apparently, in
yes,
Canada.
yeah, one uncle is theoretical.
I have dug into Canada like a tick.
Yeah.
And I intend to stay. So good luck to you fuckers down there.
But like I said, we don't have children.
Thank God.
Thank everything.
Right.
We are man-childs, however.
Yes, exactly. We are children of the corn.
Yeah.
Yeah, of the potato.
But there has been, throughout the ages, good advice given to those who do have children.
Yes.
And I think that Uncle Mark has some to impart.
I have incredibly good advice for those people who have children. You guys are going to just, by the end of this, you're going to be nodding. You will have a repetitive motion injury from nodding about what great advice this is for children. So
I'll be nodding off.
Guys, normally on our show, it's Doug, who's more of the current events guy. And what did you say the other week, Doug? You bring the news, Dan brings the Bible, and I bring the dumb, something like that.
Something like that.
And which is pretty much true. It does take the smartest guy to really understand the dumbest of the shit we do. So I appreciate that. Well, this week I'm still bringing the dumb, some rather appallingly super dumb considering the source, but it falls a tad into current events because it's something that just happened this past week. But the timing isn't really important. It's the megatonnage of so very, very much elitist, overprivileged dumb that left me wheezing. And the dumb I offer to the gods of the atheist podcasting universe today is a sweet little essay which appeared December 5th, 2019 in the cursed Wall Street Journal, the whining soapbox of the supply-side right-wing establishment. Written by an actual... What's that?
Fake news.
Fake news. Written by an actual therapist, apparently, named Erica Commissar, titled "Don't Believe in God? Lie to Your Children." Subtitled, "The alternative is to tell them they're simply going to die and turn to dust."
Okay, you need to give me a minute for my rage boner to subside, because that's fucking unbelievable.
The headline alone, like we could do 30 minutes just on that, right?
Yeah,
we don't even need to dip into the body of the op-ed. But Uncle Doug, when you're after you've consulted a physician,
I'm good.
Let's hold our horses and see how this person with a big fancy education explains this starkly binary straw universe of joyless, death-obsessed, nihilistic existential dread versus a Technicolor chocolate factory of cheerful lies, shall we? By the way, I saw this headline floating around on social media the past few days, and I did not want to read it, mostly because I was too busy explaining bodily decomposition to kindergartners in graphic detail to waste any of this pointless life on a nearly dead rock hurtling through the vacuum of space to bother reading it, until our listener Paul Friedland added me about it and said, you got to do this, so thanks. Thanks? Is that the right word, Paul? Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, put a question mark on that thanks.
Yeah, we'll come back to that thanks. So, Commissar's op-ed starts off strong with a highly debatable point stated simply as objective fact. As a therapist, I'm often asked to explain why depression and anxiety are so common among children and adolescents. One of the most important explanations, and perhaps the most neglected, is declining interest in religion. The cultural this cultural shift already has proved disastrous for millions of vulnerable young people. What?
What?
You remember when there was no childhood sadness back in the 50s?
Yes.
Yeah, back in Salem. So, one of the most positive shifts in the past decades in much of the world is young people leaving the ossified, regressive, and very often hateful religious traditions they were raised in.
Yeah.
In fact, almost all progress in human history has been achieved by either questioning or totally rejecting the orthodoxy of prior generations. Our president's, all caps tantrums aside, we don't actually have witch hunts anymore. And that's because we saw that religiously fueled insanity as just that, insanity. And when we did return to witch hunting in this country during the Satanic Panic, it was a result of religious hysteria infecting society again, not a lack of it. Right? So, sorry, Dr. Commissar, society becoming less superstitious and weighed down with Iron Age night terrors and demonology is a good thing. So, You won't believe it. She continues.
But Mark, what about the children?
Yes. What about the fucking children? I'm so tired of being more mad about people's kids than they are. About giving more of a shit than they do. It's the most bizarre. I did not think this would be my life. Anyway, she continues. Children or teens who reported attending a religious service at least once per week scored higher on psychological well-being measurements and had lower risks of mental illness.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, exactly. Weekly attendance was associated with higher rates of volunteering, a sense of mission, forgiveness, we'll talk about that, and lower probabilities of drug use and early sexual, as she calls it, initiation. Pity, then, that the U.S. has seen a 20% decrease in attendance at formal religious services in the past 20 years. According to a Gallup poll, a Gallup report earlier this year, in 2018, the American Family Survey showed nearly half of adults under 30 do not identify with any religion. Okay. Unlinked but cited study aside, there are a lot of major claims here that she breezily seems to credit to any religion. So leave aside that children in religious situations are conditioned through long years how to respond to questions about being happy, etc., right? They go to church. How could they be anything but happy? Jesus is there, therefore I'm happy. As for higher rates of volunteering, okay, great. She seems to assert that that means volunteering of one's own accord and free will, rather than the typically structured, compulsory, or heavily encouraged parish stay at the homeless shelter or youth group cleaning up the old widow's yard. Now, I'm fully down with church groups actually doing non-proselytizing actual good in the world for sure, but citing this statistic as something other than organized group effort is deeply dishonest. Okay, a higher sense of forgiveness. Yeah, I call bullshit. Again, you're asking religiously indoctrinated children to respond to terms that have been so misappropriated by their religions they're almost meaningless.
How do you measure the level of forgiveness?
Yes, exactly. It's
what is that metric?
Poppycock. What is the baseline for weighing that question? It's useless as a data point at best. Also, children who live highly structured, very supervised lives seem to experiment with drugs and alcohol and sex less than others, yeah? Well, maybe, at least as far as you know. Of course, kids who are under roofs with such where such experimentation is punishable by eternity in hellfire or extremely dire, even violent consequences in this life, if they admit to it, are going to report it less than children raised without fear about such things. For fuck's sake, what a garbage claim. The religious kids might do all that slightly less, but they absolutely know to lie about it in order to avoid a beating, right?
Right.
I think a lot of listeners would agree with this sentiment, among many other things. Growing up in a high-demand religion made me an incredibly convincing liar.
Yeah. I mean, you're not as good anymore. I'm sure you were as a kid.
No, I know. I've kind of lost my luster. And to her statement that half of people under 30 now identify as non-religious, huzzah!
Yeah.
Maybe there's hope.
There.
Right.
Exactly. Maybe there's hope to use actual reason and science to rebuild this stupid country in a post-Trump renaissance and slow global extinction with testable solutions, right?
Ooh.
God, the things this woman chooses to mourn are baffling. So,
does she cite? You said she doesn't cite the study that she names there, right?
No, she did not cite it.
Why not?
Well, she didn't link to it. I can't remember the name of the study, but she didn't link to it. I'm sure it could be found, but I didn't have time to do it because I was too mad. So there. So let us leave that paragraph and all its burning straw statistics aside. She continues, nihilism is fertilizer for anxiety and depression, and being, quote, realistic is overrated. The belief in God, in a protective and guiding figure to rely on when times are tough, is one of the best kinds of support for kids in an increasingly pessimistic world. That's only one reason, from a purely mental health perspective, to pass down a faith tradition.
Wow.
Well, Tobias Fumke was a therapist, so
yeah. He was an analrapist. So, what the fuck is this nihilism bullshit?
Right?
Are there people raising their godless children as nihilists? Probably. Is that the only alternative to the idea that when you die, an invisible part of you gets sucked into the clouds to fly around with grandma and your dead cat forever? Does this writer have some kind of mental condition where everything in life is a binary, where the two choices are as polarly opposed as conceivably possible?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
And to answer the answer to a more pessimistic world is to take the incredible gift of a rational, skeptical parent has fought to achieve, and chuck the entire struggle and hard-fought truth bequeathed us from the ancient Greeks through the Renaissance to the Enlightenment, and tell your kids an invisible man loves them, but they seriously better not piss him off. It's like you're taking fucking crazy pills. She's telling godless parents to tell their kids this, right?
Yeah.
So how about looking at the writer's very arguable canard of a more pessimistic world, and maybe seeing the solution as an optimistic yet realistic embrace of evidence-based solutions to whatever you might define as pessimism. Maybe become a scientist and work to make people or natural systems healthier. Maybe embrace love or art or kindness or humanism or
Gross.
fiction or justice or fun or whatever, for fuck's sake. Nope. Pessimism means the Bible. So she continues, I am often asked by parents, how do I talk to my child about death if I don't believe in God or heaven? My answer is always the same. Lie. Okay. Can I highly suggest anyone seeing this woman as a serious therapist stop seeing her? This is garbage.
Yeah, run away.
Good
Yeah,
God.
get the fuck away from this moron. Again, she goes on. I also frequently am asked about how parents can instill gratitude and empathy in their children. These virtues are inherent in most religions. Okay. This woman obviously knows as much about the theory and practice of religion in America, and indeed the world, as she does about atheism and skepticism, which is pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
Gratitude and empathy. Let's start with gratitude. Scraping, quivering servility on bent knee to an invincible celestial blood monster is a result of terror, not gratitude. Gratitude is freely given, not coerced by the threat of hell. And fucking empathy? Religion in practice in America is little more than the grinding away of the beautiful, natural human tendency toward empathy to replace it with in-group, out-group otherizing.
Yeah.
Teaching children that their friends will be on fire forever because your Christian denominations disagree on the date of Easter is not empathy. It is the conscious and programmatic annihilation of empathy. That's actually called hatred.
Oh.
So at last, we come to the root of all this apparently in well-meaning but disastrously terrible cluelessness. And yes, Doug, it's the Jews. Commissar writes, the concept of tikkun olam, or healing the world, is one of the pillars of my Jewish faith. In accordance with this belief, we expect our children to perform community service in our synagogue and in the community at large. As they grow older, young Jews take independent responsibility for this sacred activity. One of my sons cooks for our temple's homeless shelter. The other volunteers at a prison, while my daughter helps out in an animal shelter. Okay, great. Good for you. That's all nice.
Wouldn't it be great if atheists could also volunteer?
Yes, it's just not possible.
I wish we lived in a world with that kind of utopian ideals happening in the universe.
Too bad.
I guess we're too busy telling kindergartners graphic detail about decomposition. But
Yeah, exactly.
So tikkun olam is a wonderful idea in theory and usually in practice. I have nothing but respect for Jews who truly practice this selfless kind of service in the world. Good for them and everyone that they do good things for. But here's the point that is the fatal flaw of this horrible, horrible op-ed. The writer is not from the Bible Belt or rural Mormon country, nor did she come out of some suffocatingly horrible evangelical swamp. She attends and raised her kids in a very liberal, well-off synagogue on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, likely surrounded by other highly educated, sophisticated, and worldly intellectuals like herself. So to her, this is religion. And would that it were so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very happy to live a rational, godless life along with you two fellas, but would I have traded my miserable upbringing in a bizarre, historically violent, end-of-the-world obsessed blood cult for an affluent, educated, sane New York Jewish life? You fucking bet your bagels I would have. My Mormon church had a fucking shooting range underneath the chapel, fully equipped.
It did.
It did. We had 2 years of food storage so we could come out on top when St. Ronald Reagan won the inevitable and much pined for nuclear war.
Right.
But to Commissar, her very likely lovely temple and religious community is 100% representative of the American experience of religion. And I would imagine her fellow mental health professional and friend of the show we had on a few weeks ago, Dr. Marlene Winnell, the coiner of the term religious trauma syndrome, would very much like to beg to differ.
I know. All she has to do is cross the river to to Brooklyn and see people of her tribe, see the ultra-Orthodox Jews and how they live and how they treat their children to know that her worldview is bullshit.
Or just turn on the TV or look at Twitter or out the fucking window.
Right.
Like
exactly. It is, but she doesn't. So I'll skip ahead because I'm getting nauseous enough with this. But today the U.S. This is her again. Today the U.S. is a competitive, scary, and stressful place that idealizes perfectionism, materialism, selfishness, and virtual rather than real connection. Religion is the best bulwark against that kind of society.
Oh, my God.
Spiritual belief and practice reinforce collective kindness, empathy, gratitude, and real connection.
She hasn't met a lot of the religious people I've met.
Yeah.
She has never met a religious person outside of her synagogue. Whether children choose to continue to practice as adults is something parents cannot control, but that spiritual or religious center will benefit them in their lives. Oh, fucking K. So, rather than being honest and sensitive to an inquisitive child by saying something like, kiddo, we don't really know what happens at the end of this life. Every culture has come up with some kind of explanation, but as we learn more and more about the natural world and how it works, there's no evidence to support any of those ideas, as wonderful as some of them might be. So, your mom and I think we should embrace and celebrate this life in all its beauty and color and richness, and always remember those we love who are gone. And maybe someday we will know, but it's also okay not to know things. Yeah. She proposes, you go, God, G-O-D, God, no more questions.
God came.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
They're with Jesus now, only Jewish Jesus.
So let's instill in our children a needless culture of lies and deceit they'll eventually see past and have to unwind why the fuck you did that to them when you knew better.
Well, also, fuck God. I would rather tell my kid that Santa exists
exactly.
and just say that all your dead grandma is with Santa now.
Well, your poor grandmother's at the North
At
Pole.
least he's a little easier to understand.
I just realized something, and
he's
Uncle
nice.
Mark, tell me if I'm going to stomp on your punchline here, but I think she's ensuring job security for herself.
No, I hadn't thought of that, but it could definitely be true.
Think she's encouraging parents to damage their children that will show up in her office in 15 years.
Yeah, well, you can't heal a disease that you haven't created. So, right. This is such a perfect look at the kind of obliviousness that comfort and privilege can create. This educated, upper-class New York intellectual is somehow unable to see past the walls of her liberal synagogue and see the real face of religion in America, with its numberless pedophile priests, its mudslide of philandering and fraudulent pastors, the evangelical worship of Trump, their new Baal, and the corrosion of democracy it's ferociously trying to foster, or its covering for domestic violence of all stripes and its violent patriarchy. The children that she hopes to help of religious America are in a crisis of exploitation, abuse, and enforced ignorance from which the law provides no protection because religious apologists like Erica Commissar insist it must not. Because to people like her that know exactly nothing about what religion actually is, believe it can only ever be a force for good. And the Warren Jeffs and the Creflo Dollars and the Joel Osteens of America couldn't be more grateful for her advocacy. So,
totally.
The other thing about this is, you guys have probably heard this too, some variation of this conversation more times than I can count with some well-meaning ass who's air quotes spiritual but not religious saying, sure, there's no God, but if you don't raise your children in some religion, where will they get your morals?
Right.
We've all heard this, right?
Right.
So this is a person that is insisting that the only way you can raise moral children is to lie to them and fill their heads with a mess of Iron Age garbage they will resent you for later for not telling them was a lie. Like, what the fuck is this shit? So
well, there are myriad studies extant right now about the levels of quality of life, whether physical health or mental health, and how it's better or worse in society, in states in this country that are more or less religious. And in every case, a more religious society has worse results. Yeah. This is not rocket science. It's not even hard to find.
I mean, a simple way to define it is red states have worse outcomes for children, in education, for children, for women's health, infant mortality, more people on welfare.
Old white dudes tend to do okay.
Yeah, generally.
I'm doing fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, the biggest problem here is I had to buy a subscription to the Wall Street Journal to get past the paywall. So the struggle is real.
The main thing that I'm noticing is that it's funny. I went to get a bio of this author who because you said, I think you called her Dr. Commissar at some point, which
I don't think she's a doctor.
She is not a doctor. She's an LCSW. Nothing against that, but not a doctor. Her husband in this particular Random House bio is listed as an optometrist and social entrepreneur. I just wanted to point that out because I don't know what that means.
Whatever that is, good for them. But,
yes, indeed.
But anyway, this, pro tip, if you lie to your kids about things of great importance, don't be surprised when they lie to you as well, right?
So, yeah, right. All right.
That's a bunch of bullshit, and now you guys don't have to read it.
Thank you for that.
Yes. So the moral of the story is don't go to therapy, all right, everybody?
All right.
Exactly.
And with that, let's move on.
Let's do it.